Good morning and welcome back to Plannercraft. I'm Natalie and today we're going to be doing a little bit of watercolour. So I'm working with the Christmas Garden stamp from Chocolate Baroque, and I'm going to be using a Distress Oxide pad to try and do some no-line watercolouring, but we'll see how that goes. So before I get too far, let's do our hello. So morning Carol. And I'll just wait for a few more people to drop in. Hi Tracy. Oh, we got some duplicates going on. Working well this morning. Let's try the multi-stream one, see if that behaves. Morning Thea. Yes, Tracy, how are your fingers today? Hopefully a little less singed. Okay, so, as I said, today I'm going to be working with a Chocolate Baroque stamp. The Distress Oxide I'm using is weathered wood, just because I don't want to go all out black. And I'm going to be using some all media artist paper from Paper Mill Direct. So this is 300 GSM and it takes pretty much anything you throw at it. It's really nice to work with. Now it does have a texture, which means that when you are stamping onto it, you are going to get some areas that hit and miss. So hence I've gone for something a little bit darker. Otherwise, if you're working on something that is smooth, you could go for an antique linen so that you have a softer line to work with. And morning Mum. Oh, that blister sounds painful, Tracy. Deb, dare I ask why you're rebuilding an IKEA unit? Is that like Mr. had to rebuild a shelf? One finger typing, okay. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a piece of card. Now I have A5 and A6. So first of all, what you want to consider is how much of the stamp you want to use. Because it's such a nice big stamp, you don't have to use all of it. You can actually crop into areas if you want to, or you can actually, when you're inking up, choose to just ink certain parts of the stamp. So for this first section, I'm thinking I'm going to see if I can manage to get our little robin just here. So I'm going to work with some A6 card, and I'm going to try and make sure that my robin is where I want him. So he's facing that way anyway, so if you think you want your white space kind of in the direction he's looking, so that you're looking into your piece. And then I can just apply a little bit of masking tape rather than using your magnets, because obviously if we put our magnet there and then try and stamp, you can safely say it's not going to work. So I'm going to pop one magnet just at the bottom, and it's just literally just on my edge, and just make sure if it can go on a bit more, move it on a little bit. You can also use a piece of cutting mat in here to actually hold that down. For what I'm going to do today, let's use a little bit of masking tape. Yeah, I've done a fair bit of modifying IKEA furniture before now. Sometimes works well, other times not so well. Okay, so I'm going to start off with just that masking strip at the top. Then what I'll do is I'll stamp my image, and then I can apply masking tape to the rest of the sides when I move onto my mat. So let's just pop that magnet in there, and let's get our inking. So as I said, I'm working with an oxide because oxides actually stamp better than the distress inks. I'm going to start off by really inking up the area that I know I definitely want to keep, because we can go around after and just do a little clean up. Now the other advantage of doing it with a Distress Oxide pad is that if there are any areas that you miss, you can usually wash them back out again. So I'm just going to get a little cotton bud, and we can start to think about the areas we want to keep in. So I'm going to take out the candle here. Now, as you're doing this, just bear in mind that your ink is starting to dry on your stamp, which we don't want. So try and move as quickly as possible. I'm going to follow this holly round here, because you want to keep the holly in, and just clean off the rest of the stamp. Is it going to be perfectly clean? No. Is it going to be much better than the rest of it? Yep. Okay, let's get that bottom line there, and round here, because we don't want to get that in there, and a little bit there. Okay, and there's a little bit on there. So with that done, if you tilt your head kind of down level with it, you can see where the light will actually hit your wet ink. So if you have missed anything, you can always go and just add that back in or take away. So we've got something that looks like this. So if we look here where we've got a little bit of holly, just want to press that a little bit more so that we keep that in. And the other bits we can fade out. Okay, so once you have that background, we can get started. Yeah, don't modify your IKEA furniture with a laser cutter. That's Ian's trick. Okay, so because the ink is water reactive, we can just use a water spray just to clean that up. Now at this point, if you want to do a different section with another piece of card, you can do. But just for time today, I'm going to start off with this one, and if I have any extra time at the end, I can do another one. So let's carefully peel this off. So I'm going to keep this masking tape on. Close it up for now. I'm going to put this onto my mat. Now I'm going to use the grid of my mat to help me align that on so it's level. So when we're masking the edges of our card, that's going to try and help stop any wrinkling. Hi, Kareem. That needs to be a little bit longer. Save that for something else. There we go. You want it to go the full length of your card, otherwise all you're going to do is move that wrinkle to the place that isn't stuck down. And you want to do this whenever you are going to do a background where you're going to be using lots of water. So I'm going to start off by doing the foreground for a change, then do the background after. Okay. With that done, we're going to need some brushes. And I'm going to pull out a few different sizes from my stash. So some bigger ones for doing our background, and some smaller ones for the detail. Okay. Now I've pulled out a few paint sets. Ooh, that sounds painful, Carol. So I have the metallic paint set. Inktense set 2, which tend to have more like your dual light tones. Then you have the more standard Inktense 1. Okay, so I do keep these actually in their respective containers just so that I can refer to them for colours if I need to. Now with Inktenses, once they are on and dry, they are permanent. Yes, Carol, it's the same set you have. So for those of you that are on the watercolour course last year, you'll have that set. So once those dry, they're permanent, and then you can actually layer on top if you want to. But for now, let's get started with a little bit of detail. So I'm going to start off with a fairly small brush, and I'm just going to get a pot of water. Wait a minute, the roller's not falling over. There we go. So I do have a bamboo cloth to one side that I can block my brush off on. Doesn't have to be pretty. Okay. Now I'm going to start off with the holly, and in Inktense 2 you have these kind of nice bluey greens that we can use, and then we can use the sort of lemon yellow to actually lift that up to a lime green. So let's get started. Just going to add a bit more to my palette. Okay. So I'm going to start off by picking out my first leaf of holly, and I'm going to follow that outline. So down at the bottom, it's going to be quite dark anyway, and we're going to fill that in. Okay. I'm going to start to do the same along here, but as we come a bit further along, I'm going to miss a few bits. Now this is the opportunity to dip your brush in a bit more water, and we're going to pick up some of that lemony yellow to start to mix a more yellowy version. So hopefully you can see that. Yep. And I'm going to drop that in here, and I'm going to go over the top of that bottom section, so it's going to start tinting what's underneath, like so. Give my brush a quick wash, and always blot, and then we can just drag that colour out just to blend it in. Okay. That's okay, Joyce. We won't put you on the naughty step. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in with our dark green, and I'm going to leave a little line at the top so that we have somewhere that a highlight can catch. A bit more of that dark green. And there. If you need to go a bit darker, you can always go back to the actual pan itself. Like so. Then I can go to my light green and blend that in. Again, it's going to come back up that side, picking out which areas I want to put that yellow green in. Now we can start to go a little bit down the middle. Okay, and same here too. So it's paler and not too pale. So as we move up, we're going to get a little bit lighter so that we can show that that light is coming down. So these ones at the bottom are the ones that are most in shadow. Now we're going to start mixing our colours a little. So I'm putting what's left of that light green back into the darker green section. So we're starting to get a little bit of that tone coming through. And if it's not quite dark enough, just pick up a little bit more and mix it back in. There we go. So you want it to be dark, but not as dark as the section underneath it. Give your brush a wash, do a little blot, pick up a little bit of that lighter colour, and we're going to fill in the gaps. Okay. So for this next one, I want it to look like it's curling. So I'm going to wet the area first, just with what's left on my brush, and then I'm going to blend that darker colour into it. And same at the top here. Now, if you're getting a harsh line, just plot your brush and just drag it back from that light to that dark. And usually that's just enough to put it out. So we have one more dark one that's going to be coming just underneath the robin's belly, like so. You can leave a little bit of a highlight if you want to, just where the vein would be. That's going to be pushed right back underneath. Now, this next one, I'm going to go darker around our robin, and just add a little water and blot, and we're just going to drag that colour out. Right, it's still wet. I'm going to do a little drop of dark just in this bottom section and let that blend. A little bit just there, take that up to the edge. Give it a little wash and just pick up a little bit of that lighter green. So we're introducing that warmth back into that colour along that top edge. Okay, a little bit more, so back to the dark. Now this is where we're going to have to start doing a little bit of artistic license. Because you're working with a collage stamp where you've got lots of different elements, those ones that you don't stamp, you are going to want to almost camouflage in a way so that we can finish the design off nicely. So I'm going to start off by painting what I do know. Then I can actually go, okay, in which case, and the holly's going to go something like this. And if we do it paler to start with, then we can fix anything we're not happy with. So I'm not quite happy with where that point's going. I'm going to take that up there, and maybe up here, and a little bit more of a point there. Okay, so now we can come in with a bit darker colour and just strengthen that back up. Now we can do the same going back down this side. Okay, and when you're happy, pick up some of that light green and we can put that in to strengthen that colour on that top edge and where the light would hit along here. So far so good. So I need a bit more of that light green. into my dark green. Okay. Just going to do this left hand side, like so. Over the top. Try and go right up to your outline as well, so that way you'll actually pick up some of that distress oxide and actually start blending that into your painting. So if there's any areas that you think could do with a little bit more colour, now that you've done that, now's the time to do it. So I'm just going to put that in there like that. Just going to go a bit more dark green in here just so it stands out as being underneath. Okay. Let's get a bit more of that lemon yellow now. Use what's left on my palette to do the darker and a little bit more. There we go. And let's do one next little bit of holly just here. So with this one we can actually start to miss quite a few bits because it would be getting the light full on, so you want it to look shiny. Just going to do a little bit around this outline here, like so. I'm going to give my brush a good clean, blot it out a bit so there's barely anything left in the brush. I'm just going to blend little bits of that in so that we're softening that light, but only very slightly. Okay. Oh, Tracy, we'll always miss you. Okay. Let's get some more of the dark green again, and we're going to start back down on this stem. So again, because it's down the bottom, it's going to be the darkest. I'm going to pick up some of our light green and we're just going to crop that in. Now there will be some areas where it mixes, there'll be other areas where you'll get like a line, but both are fine because at the end of the day holly leaves are usually nice and shiny. And the way that we can show that in our work is by that level of contrast going from one colour to the next. Oh dear, that's a little bit cheeky, Carol. Okay, so this time we've got one that's kind of on the curl upwards, so it's going to get a bit more light even though it's further down. So I'm going to start off with that lighter green and then just introduce a few little touches of the dark green along this edge here. So we get the feeling that our holly leaf is curling. No, but just on the edge. Then we'll go back to our dark green. We're going to make that come forward a little bit darker than that. There we go. Just want to try and make that one pointy bit kind of come forward, so we can concentrate on the darkness around that, so that you can still see that they're overlapping. Okay, so I'm going around the points. So up towards the top, we can bring in lots of that light green. I want that to fade out as it comes down. Like so. Okay. There we go. While that's drying for a bit, I'm just going to go to this other side and go on here. I'm just going to clean my brush a little. I'm just going to plop a bit of that colour out, just where that light would hit, and then stretch it into other colours, well, other areas that we might have missed. Get the highlights, like so. And there's one very faint one right up here. Just kind of twisting away from the light. So let's do a little bit of dark section. Pick up some of that light green. I'm just going to curl back round to the light. I'm going to pour some of that dark green colour across. And just drop a little bit in there, in the join. So you should have some nicely variegated holly leaves. Forming. And let's get this last little bit just here done. And this one's quite big. Lots of opportunity for detail. Let's pick up some of our lighter green. A little bit extra water. So because we've taken down our card to begin with, we don't have to worry as much about the amount of water that we're putting on. Because as long as we let it dry before we remove that tape, it should still dry nice and flat. Yes, Tracy, you can put a link up. brush game, I quite often give you lots of hints and tips. So yeah. Okay, so with our leaves done, next we're going to do our holly berries. Now this is why I have set one here too, so you're going to find that when you start playing with your colours, you're going to find a few different shades of red are going to be useful. So in set 2 we have, let me get the right colour, so we have cherry, okay, and cherry's a very blue red, so if I put some out here you can see it, so it's quite intense, whereas if we go, give it a good clean, if we go across to our intense set 1, you're going to see that this one's a bit more of a warm red, so it doesn't have a lot of depth to it, whereas this one's really strong. So the advantage of that is that we can do one layer using our lighter red and then let that dry, and then we can actually put our shading in with our deeper red. Now the reason I say let it dry is because these berries are tiny. If they were bigger, then do it wet and wet, but these are tiny. So if you try and do it wet and wet on here, you're more likely to get your darker colours going onto the berries that join it, which we don't want to do. Now, down the bottom here, they're going to have very small highlights, if any. But highlights are something you want to put in with this first layer. Because again, berries are shiny. And you could be using any holly stamp for this, but I love the variety you get with this one. Just so happens it's going to be on craft store tomorrow. Okay, so with this one that's underneath, you want a very tiny highlight, because the light would be hitting the other 3 first before it even gets anywhere near that last berry. And we're going to do the same again with this one, so slight bigger highlight because it's a little bit closer. Okay, getting a little bit smaller. And with this one, perhaps being non-existent. Okay, so there's our 3 sets of berries. I'm going to give my brush a really good rinse out. Okay, so I'm just going to reshape my brush because I've done a really good scrub of a wash. So to do that, just literally pinch it between your fingers and rotate the brush between each pinch, so that you're getting it to a nice point. So you should do that whenever you are washing your brushes at the end of your session as well. So what bird is it? It's a robin. It's a little robin. They're kind of synonymous with Christmas over here. I think America has more kind of the red cardinals as theirs. So you'll have to tell us which birds end up on your Christmas card, Tracy. Yeah, it was definitely the cat did it. Okay, so this is going back to that cherry colour. And I'm just going to start using that to build in depth. So straight away you can see on there, suddenly we've taken that flat form to a shaded form. Let's see if I can zoom in a little without it going a bit from a weird angle. Up a little bit. Come on. Up, 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 up. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to do the same for this one here. So around that base bit. Around the base here. So this one you literally only go around the bottom. You don't want to go over the top unless it is sitting underneath something else. So this bottom one around here is going to be sitting underneath these other two. So you want to do a little bit on top of that one. So that's where you're going to push it back. Magpies, they get everywhere, they do. Okay, so I will try and stop knocking the desk. It's very difficult because it wobbles every time I turn around to see comments. There we go. So now in there. Now with this one, because it's kind of in front of this one here, I'm not going to do it on top there. But this one looks like it's just kind of over it, so I'm just going to do a little bit just to this side and underneath. Again, make sure that you're going up to your lines, and that one's tucking back underneath that one and underneath that one. There you go. Zoom back out and back up a little bit. There we go. So same down here, underneath, round in there. Oh. And if you do that, this is going to be one of those ones where don't try and wash it out, because the red is so strong that if you try and wash it out, all you're going to get is a lovely pink. So just go with it. Okay. So we've got our nice strong looking berries. Now I'm going to change brush and I'm going to go a little bit bigger for our bird. So if you have 2 pots of water, which I usually would do, you're going to want to use a little bit clean water. Okay. And I'm going to paint that clean water onto my robin. Just over his belly and slightly beyond. In terms of up here. Okay, and while that's still wet, I'm going to pick up a bit of that red and we're going to drop it in. So the idea being that as it hits that water, it's going to blend. Okay, so that's our kind of basic red from set 1. We can pick up some of that darker red that we used to shade the cherry, like so. Now if it goes on his legs, don't worry, because we're going to be painting over that anyway. And you might also want to pick up a little bit of bright orange, which might seem like a bit of a scary thing, but what that's going to do is just add a little variation into your feathers. So I'm just going to drop that in. So wash my brush, give it a little blot again, and I'm just going to blend this top edge. Okay, so for his face, what I tend to do is just get a little bit of yellow ochre, water that down, and we can just drop that in like so. Wash your brush, blot it off, and let's just take that over. Now I'm going to use that colour as a wash down the back of my robin, so that he's then going to be ready to do some wet and wet. Take some darker brown, and again we can just drop that in into that wet area. Now obviously go careful where your wings touch the red section, just in case you did manage to nudge any water over there accidentally. But all things being good, you should find that your wings stay where they should be. Without contaminating the belly. As we move down the bird, we want to get a little bit darker. Like so. Okay. Again, I'm just going to blot, pick up a little bit of that yellow ochre. So this is really little amount of paint we're talking about now. And I'm just going to take that down the leg. And we can use some of that dark brown just to go underneath the feet, just there. So we have our robin. Nice simples. See you tomorrow, Joyce. We're doing Christmas tags and ATCs tomorrow. A bit of mixed media. So with our branches for our holly, you have two options. You can go darker, or you can go warmer if you've used a cooler brown. So the idea being that you want to differentiate it in some way from your robin, so that your robin's going to stand out. So I'm going to take some of that darker brown, like so, and a little bit of dark colour. So I'm going really dark. Now a little bit more water to that, just because it needs water to have that little bit of movement. It's also going to help you keeping a nice point on your brush. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of paint grey to add to that, which is going to further cool that brown down. Okay, now at this point, if you are not feeling confident, you can use a much smaller brush. I'm going to brave it just because I should have a nice fine point on my brush. Now bear in mind, if you are using texture card like this, your brush when it is starting to get a little bit dry can be a bit hit and miss. Or likewise, if you're using a bigger brush like this where you've got a point, you can find the point likes to skip, and that's fine, just go with it. And take this up and over around here and underneath. the stems down to our berries. Now the longer you paint with a brush, the paler your colour is going to become. So always start at the bottom and work your way up. So if you're looking between your two stems here, then you'll see that there's a kind of another bit that's that same level there. So I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to come back over here and do this next section here. Blend that back in. Swap again. Do this section here. So I haven't reloaded that brush at all. And anything that you put in your palette is always going to be rewettable. So it's only when it's on paper that it's going to dry permanently. Or you can use them on fabric, I believe. Not that I've tested that in a while. There we go. And now let's do this bit here. On this one, and we've got a stem that goes up here, and it's going to have another spur just there. It's going to be slightly longer. Nearly there, just this last one up here to do. And there we go. Yep, it's going to be the little touches that it's only going to make you go, oh yeah, that looks really good now, because when you're seeing it kind of in sections, it can start to look a bit like the bits you have coloured jump forward, and then you can struggle sometimes to see the rest of it until you add that colour to it. So it becomes a bit of a picture of some holly and you can't see what else. Then you put the robin in and it's robin and some holly, then it's like, oh no, the robin's actually sat on a twig. Okay, so time to wash that brush. And you want to wash it really, really, really well. Set that to one side to dry for a little bit. So when you're drying your brushes, try and either dry them horizontally or bristles down. If you can do it that way, it's better, but if you haven't got any way of actually holding them like that, to dry them that way is a little bit better. That is a definite no-no. Okay, so I'm switching to my biggest watercolour brush I've got, which is the size 12. And what I want to do is I'm going to start doing a bit of a wash. So I'm going to work one way, then I'm going to actually work the other. So normally if I'm doing a gradiated wash like this, what I would say is it's easier if you have your mat or whatever you're working on, your base, actually slightly tilted, but it doesn't work for cameras. Or at least not like this. So I'm just going to take some of that water down just in here, so we're starting to pick up some of that ink that's already there, and we can start to blend that in. So a bit more water at the top, and this is where you're going to see that it's going to start trying to buckle and fight back. If you get to this point, you think, well, I've taped it down and you can see it's doing that when you press your brush on it. I that's coming across on camera, but you can see it's like slightly buckled, and when you press your brush it's doing this kind of thing. Don't panic, because that tape is there, so long as you leave it to dry totally, whether that's overnight or if you do want to try and use a low heat gun, then it will come back. So with that top section, let's do a little bit of wash, and I'm thinking something quite soft. So I'm going to start off with this orangey colour that's already in my palette. Just make sure you get any paint that's already there. And to that I'm going to add a bit of this warm yellow. So we're getting a hint that there's some kind of light. A little bit of water. That's going to release what's in your brush. And each time you're going to add a little bit more water to your brush rather than going back and getting more paint. So it's going to give you a nice soft background to work with. More water. Around in there, around there, and we can put a bit more around here too. So what I'm thinking is it would be nice to have some kind of soft texture that we put around our holly. Now if you've got a bit more of a stamped pattern than what I have, then what you might do is try and use that to kind of inform what might be blurred out in the background. So for instance, up in this section here, I can see I've got a little bit of a leftover from the baubles. So I can actually go, okay, well what colour baubles might be hanging there? And I might go for a nice soft bluey grey. So I'm just going to use a new section of my palette. Let's see if I can move that over slightly. I'm just going to get some of that Payne's grey. And just have that nice soft colour. So I might go, okay, so that bit's going to be slightly more dented in. There might be a bit of shadow around here, like that. And the whole point is not that you're perfectly representing what's behind, because you're going to come in with just some water and make sure that you keep blotting your brush, because you're going to want to fade these things outwards, because we want them to be nice and soft, and it's just a hint. So coming up to this next section, there's going to be the little cap, and there might be a bit more colour in that, so just a fraction. So this is where you're going to be looking at doing really soft amounts of colour. Yeah, you literally use the least amount of paint possible. So for this next one here, we've got a Stripy Bauble. Now, again, lots of water in your brush. Pick up a little bit of that red. I'm just going to go drop that in. So it's going to have a stripe there, stripe kind of there-ish, and there. And this is not about being accurate. And there's a little bit that comes down there. So again, wash, blot, fade. So it's all about softening that colour. So you're just getting a little bit of a hint. So even if you look at something and you think, oh, that's too complicated, I can't do all that. And it's like, you don't have to. Just soften it back, so that you are giving the merest hint. If you think it needs a little bit more colour to actually make that a bit more distinguished to be a stripy one, we can pop little bits of colour in, like so. We're because it's still wet, and it's going to carry on blending. And I'm going to wash my brush, get a bit more of this grey. I'm just going to drop some in to say that it's got a little cap. Okay, so moving across to this side, we've got some little flames going on from our candles. So we can take some of that orangey colour and we can drop in some flames and have those kind of glowing in the background. Again, wash, blot, fade it out. It's just there for a hint. A bit more down that one there. Okay. Then you might go, well, if there's candle flames there, let's give it a little candle to work with. So again, plenty of water back into that red. And we're going to go, okay, there's a candle kind of there-ish. And there's one there for that one. And even though there's other bits that are happening further down, you're just going to let that go through and blend out nice and soft. A little bit more kind of down towards the bottom, because remember, as it moves away from that light, that flame, it's going to get a little bit darker. And a little bit more down here. Like so. So now I'm going to wash that brush out. And we're going to blend that colour. So back down this edge here, so it's softer. Blend it out that way. Okay. So now, as we've done our little candles here, we can go, well actually, does it need something else over here to kind of make that finish off? And I think it does. So I'm just going to go back and add a little bit more of that grey colour to my palette. And it doesn't matter if it's not a distinctive kind of shape. It's just there to just finish things off and say there's something there, but I don't know exactly what. It's fading out because we just want to focus on our nice little holly. There we go. And just let that colour kind of fade across. And pick up a bit more of that same grey colour, and let's fill in the gaps around here so that we're actually creating background for this to sit on. Now as you do this, just bear in mind that you want to start pale and blend it out, and then you can always add in a bit more if you think that there are areas that need contrast to make them pop out. So I'm just going to blend that like so. This is all really soft watercolour now, because you don't want to do anything that is going to take away from the softness or almost the legibility, I suppose, of the design. Now where you've got something that's a little bit lighter, like this little leg here, then you can add in a bit more colour next to it, and that's going to help it start to pop out. So if you think about your colours of your foreground, if it's dark, go light around it. If it's light, you're going to want to do the opposite. here where you've got this flame happening, you don't want to take that grey out too far because you want to give the impression that it is actually glowing. Okay, and there's something just there because we got that little bit of stamp, so let's just do a little bit of a hint of bauble. Push out the brush and blend it back. There we go. It's a good idea to step away from your work every so often as well, just so that you can see how it's starting to progress. If there's any obvious bits that you've missed, because sometimes you can't see for looking. Just pop a little bit under there. It's one of the reasons why it's quite good to be streaming, because I can turn around and see a kind of zoomed out version straight, more or less straight on. So I think I'm just going to just soften that down a bit in there. There we go. That's okay, Dulcie. So we now have something that we can actually take forward into our watercolours or into our cards. What you do want to do is obviously let this dry, and then you can actually stamp or foil onto this using your scanner glue if you want to. You can stamp your sentiment, you can emboss onto it. What I would say is, if you are stamping a sentiment, just be aware of the texture of the card that you're using. So if you know you want to stamp ahead of time, then what I would recommend is using something that's a little bit smoother, like you can get the Strathmore mixed media paper that tends to be a bit smoother than this one. If you want to go to a fully smooth watercolour card, you can do that too. So I hope you've enjoyed that little session, and just to repeat in case you didn't hear at the start, the stamp was from Chocolate Baroque and will be on telly tomorrow. It's the Christmas garden. And then the paints are all Derwent paints, so I used the set 1 and set 2. Now I did put the metallics there in case I decided to use those, but I decided to go with a different section of the stamp. I think you need to stamp another image of this and put it on the page, then do a watercolour class on it. If I was to do a class on the whole image, it would be a good afternoon. So if you would like to do that, then do let me know. It is literally quite a complex image, and if you have a look on the post that I put on the group for Leslie's show, there's one on there that I did on a tag where I just literally took a strip of it as well, so you can see some of the other details a bit closer up. But yeah, it's a good afternoon to sit and work through the image. Lots of different pieces and techniques you can do. So there's lanterns on there, there's the candles on there, so you learn about using light. You've got things like baubles on there to do like your different textures. So it's a good afternoon session. And thank you, Linda. Thank you, Tracy. If you do want to do a class on it, if you can all let me know. Either if Tracy, if you can put up a post in the group, that'd be fantastic. So I can see rough numbers, and then I can work out costs and things, because that's going to be a whole session. So take care for now, and I will see you all tomorrow when we are doing mixed media Christmas tags with Pretty Gets Gritty. Okay, Carol, I'll count you in. And thank you, Corinne. Then next week what I'm thinking is we have a few projects that I want to finish off, including the crackers and the book Christmas cards. And then it would be really fun to do another Christmas card design that you can do really quickly. Really, really, really quickly. So, clean and simple cards. Yay. And then maybe later in the week we'll do something a bit more in depth, so it might be a two-parter. So take care for now, and